Welcome back to the Arsenal podcast. My name is Cossy. Welcome back to a brand new video. This is your latest Arsenal news and transfer news, of course, with the January transfer update. We're going to be diving into some of the latest around the club. It looks like Arsenal want to make about 3 signings in January, depending on availability, depending on the conditions on the market, but also on the key targets if they can be attained as well in the next 2 months. So we're going to be diving into some of those positions we want to talk about and Arsenal are planning to fill in January, and some of the players and why I think it is purely unrealistic that Arsenal will sign 3 players in January. Look, I think the conditions dictate that we go as high as 3 players in January. We need a striker, we need a midfielder, and we need a backup for Bukayo Saka. And Arsenal going, we want to sign 3 players. That is the truth. That is what we need. But do we have the resources and do we have the time? Do we have the I don't think we have the minerals. I don't think we have the resources to go 3 players come in January, top quality, and they're the targets we want. Unless we're going to compromise, I don't think three players is actually attainable. Unless you're Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea have done it before. They have signed Mikhailo Modric for close to 100 million. They've signed Enzo Fernandez above 100 million. They've also signed Noni Madueke. And they've kind of had a shot in the January transfer window of 2023. But can Arsenal replicate the same? Let's see, right? Let's hit the like button, subscribe to the podcast as well. And I want your thoughts there, guys. If we were to sign 1 player in January or 2, what positions do you think are priority? Is it striker and winger to back up Saka? Is it midfielder and striker? I mean, you're going to have Partey leaving in January, and you have Nene leaving as well for AFCON in January. So we might have some kind of a hole in midfield. So is it midfielder and striker? Is it midfielder and winger? Let me know in the comment box below, and talk to me, of course, about the names that you would love to see coming in our Arsenal in those positions. Right, so let's get into the talk. Arsenal eyeing 3 signings in January, and they're looking at 3 priority areas that need to be attended urgently. The 3 areas are striker, midfielder, and a winger. So Arsenal looking at a right winger. Pedro Neto obviously is the top candidate in that one, and I think this is coming from the fact that we are looking at Bukayo Saka, the amount of games is played, the amount of minutes is playing, and Arsenal, Mikel Arteta, Edu, and whoever is actually running the thing at Arsenal is concerned that maybe Bukayo Saka might not take us all the way through the season. Last campaign, he kind of capitulated towards the end of the campaign, and Arsenal suffered courtesy of that. Mikel Arteta failed to replace him, he failed to rotate him, and eventually the player couldn't give us any kind of good output anymore towards the back of the season. In the midfield, I think this comes from the fact that Partey's, of course, Partey's injury prone. But then you've got to think about the fact that if he goes in January and Elneny goes in January, Arsenal will be left with only 2 players. That is Jorginho and Declan Rice. Can that take us for another 1 or 2 months? Possibly. But when it gets intense, when the season becomes sharp, intense, physical, dynamic, and all those things, it's going to be hectic, and Arsenal will need some fresh legs. Arsenal will need some young blood, and probably that's why Mikel Arteta is looking at that. If I have Declan Rice as the only player I can depend on, as the only player I can rely on, how about we go in the market and sign a new player? Douglas Luiz is the leading contender on that position. More on that, of course. And then the striking position is what we've all said, that maybe Arsenal need goals. Maybe Arsenal are not that bad. Maybe Arsenal are not bottlers of last year. Maybe we just don't have goals. Maybe we just don't have a striker that can score goals that can actually take us over the line. For example, Erling Haaland, so many times last campaign, scored goals that helped Manchester City win the title. And in my opinion, if you give Erling Haaland's goals to Arsenal win the title without a question, without a doubt. So those are the 3 positions that Arsenal are looking at, and however much I think it is good and beautiful, I really think it is highly unlikely. But let's get into the priority of these positions. In my opinion, the most important position of these 3 is the midfield. And I kind of agree with Glenn on this one. The last time he was on the channel, he kind of opened my eyes. He said, listen, Cossy, if Arsenal lose one of our best midfielders right now, everything we have built, everything this Arsenal team has achieved until this point in time in the season will capitulate. And we have lived this experience before when Thomas Partey picked up an injury in the January of 2022 and Arsenal didn't replace him. It was the same thing when we tried to sign Moises Caicedo in the January of this year. We didn't get him. And eventually, Partey capitulated. He was no longer as consistent as he was during the beginning of the campaign as compared to the back end of the campaign, and Arsenal suffered in midfield. So when Mikel Arteta and Edu highlight the midfield as a key area and as a key area of priority, I listen. I definitely listen to them. Now, the three players that have already been linked with the club in this in that position, Quinten Timber, the brother to Jurgen Timber, again, he's more of a ball winner in midfield. You have Andre at Fluminense, 22 years of age, really brilliant Brazilian, linked with Arsenal. We know the Brazilian market can actually open up in January. If you want to sign a player in January from Brazil, it is highly possible. And January, like I said, is a market of possibilities. It's a market of availability. Whoever is not available, whoever is not for sale, you don't waste time on that deal. And finally, Douglas Luiz, who is for me the top contender. Now, I kind of agree with Mikel. He's got to be scared. When you lose Partey and you lose Elneny, you're losing a lot. You're losing physicality, you're losing experience, you're losing pedigree, but then you're losing squad depth and you're losing numbers. And of course, January and February means that Arsenal still in the UCL and Arsenal still in the Premier League and a couple of other competitions, including the FA Cup as well. So we will need numbers. If we can get Douglas Luiz, or if we could get Douglas Luiz, I would be happy. I would certainly think we would have done a very, very kind of, a big masterstroke. But it cannot happen. We cannot sign Douglas Luiz in January. It's a deal that is practically impossible. Even if we wanted to, even if we had the money, I think Aston Villa would prefer to sell him in the summer, knowing that they can replace him, knowing that their ambitions for this for the calendar year are fulfilled. For example, if they want to win the Conference League, Douglas Luiz can help them do that. If they want to qualify for the Champions League or Europa League, Douglas Luiz can actually do that. He's such a very important player for Unai Emery and his men, and I don't see them easily go, well, you want Douglas Luiz, Arsenal, how about we give him to you in January? It's not going to happen. He's one of those players that are not available in January. In the summer, yeah, we can talk about it. No player doesn't have a price tag. Everyone is for sale, and every player wants that huge move into his career. Douglas Luiz has always been at Aston Villa for quite some time, and in my opinion, eventually he will want to go back to that top level. He's been at City, then move to Villa. He will want to go back to a bigger stage, to a higher stage. And I think Arsenal will be offering that. But in January, I don't see it as a deal that will be easy on the plate. Quinten Timber is an interesting one. Feyenoord, again, I'm not really sure they will be willing to sell in January. Like, they're flying right now. They're having the dream campaign of their dreams, if you know what I'm talking about, if you follow them. I don't think Feyenoord will be looking to sell this January. And then you think about Andre. Can he be the guy that comes in from Brazilian football into the Premier League and make a difference? I don't think so. So if Arsenal want to genuinely sign a midfielder, which we should genuinely be thinking about, it should be an attainable target. Like, it should be a player who you can get. I'm not really sure. A loan deal could work. For example, you could go to Aston Villa and talk about, negotiate for Leandro Dendonka. I mean, it's a bad decision, isn't it? It's a bad suggestion. But that's what I mean. Like a loan deal, the way we got Martin Odegaard, you can't get a good loan deal. And if it works out, you can eventually sign the player on a permanent in the summer. But the midfield, I like that. I like the thinking behind a midfielder. It really makes a lot of sense. Now, the winger situation, guys, comes from the fact that we have now seen what we were waiting to see. We are so stupid. We are absolutely stupid lunatics. What we have done is we have decided to bring butter closer to fire and see if it can melt with the Bukayo Saka situation. And now we are really shocked. We're like, woo, butter can melt near fire, because we have played Saka consistently and consistently for a long period of time until he picked up an injury. And now we are so surprised and we're rushing to find a backup for Bukayo Saka. It's actually purely hypocrisy. Last summer, but one, Arsenal missed out on Rafinha. Last summer, Arsenal missed out on Pedro Neto, and we also missed out on a chance to sign the likes of Nico Williams, Mohamed Kudus, and Nicolo Zaniolo. The summer before that, Arsenal again were looking at we're looking at wingers. So it looks like we know what the problem is, and we know the problem where the problem is, and we know where the solution and what the solution would be. We have just not taken action. As simple as that. So I think Mikel again is trying to be prudent. He's trying to be proactive in this instant. He's trying to go, how about we bring in a winger who can help us protect Saka and maybe give us the same amount of quality that Saka brings to this team. That is kind of genius, Mikel. But hey, you have done that and you have seen that 3 years ago. You have been talking about that for 2 complete years. We should have signed a winger earlier on. So the winger is we're talking about is Pedro Neto, and that makes things even worse, like really worse, because he's a good player. He can play side to side, can play on the left hand side, on the right hand side. He's very, very technically gifted, speedy, flashy. You can talk about all the ingredients you would want in a wide player. But are Wolves going to sell in January? Unless they are absolutely charmed, I don't think they should be selling in January. And I don't think they will sell in January. With Pedro Neto, you're looking at the backbone. You're looking at the reason why Wolves exist at the moment. So they have lost their striker in Jimenez, and they have also lost their captain in Nunes, right? Neves, sorry. In Neves. That team is bones. That team is bare bones, right? Like, for me, it's bare bones. They have some talent there, and maybe they can survive relegation if they can keep on, picking up those results here and there. But if they lose Pedro Neto, they know it's over. If they lose Pedro Neto midway the campaign, midway the season, they know it's over. I'm not saying they cannot sell, because I do not know the level of smartness of the people running the deals in there. But in my opinion, it won't be an easy deal for Arsenal to do. But listen, again, on the other end, if you offered them good money that they know they might not get again if Arsenal maybe walked away, they would consider selling. So the winger situation I like. I think Mikel Arteta has looked at it and it's gone, Saka could pick up a long-term injury any point in time. Saka has been traveling and working with an Achilles nagging injury, so anything that could explode into anything at any point in time. And finally, I think Arsenal have just looked at if you want to keep Saka efficient and effective, reduce the number of minutes he's playing, reduce the number of games he's playing, and let him focus when he's on the pitch, rather than trying to manage him in the games where he's playing, trying to manage him for the games to come. So I think the winger situation, brilliant. It can wait until the summer, definitely, but it would be brilliant if we got one. The third one is the striker situation that we've talked about a lot on this channel, and I know many of you are going to say Osimhen, Ivan Toney, and all that, but I think the striker situation, like David Onstein put it very, very clearly and very well, is very difficult, and Arsenal need to be very, 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 very careful and very smart. I think the lack of strikers in Europe could lead to clubs making huge losses on one end of the scale, and other clubs making huge profits on the other end of the scale. Like, it's the same as the defensive midfield situation. You have Joe Palhinha, you have I think it's Martin Zubamendi, then you had Edson Alvarez, Caicedo, and Declan Rice, and maybe Zakaria, 6. And you look at the number of teams that needed a defensive midfielder. They were in tens. So that meant that Rice would go for 100 plus. That meant that Caicedo would go for 100 plus, which he wasn't a 100 plus player, honestly, at that point in time. And that means that the decent midfielders, the decent quality, high quality midfielders are now done. So whoever goes in is going to sign a subsidized, quality player at a very huge price. It's the same that's going to happen with the striker position. Ivan Toney, Victor Osimhen, who's the third one? Probably Rotalo Martinez could be on the market if it's possible, and then Oli Watkins. But how much are we going to pay? How much are clubs going to pay for this? Hugely expensive. What I would suggest here is Arsenal should wait until the summer to address the striker situation. We should wait until the summer. I don't see it become an easy deal. And again, it's a deal that will depend on, I would say, availability of a good deal. That's what I would say, because if Ivan Toney is 100 million in January, Arsenal won't pay. Victor Osimhen is not going for anything less than that, and Watkins will be untouchable. So again, you have to wait for the summer. But again, I like the striker. I would like the idea of a striker, because Arsenal need to score some silly goals to win some serious trophies. Do I make sense? Like those goals, tap-ins, goals off on the line, those poacher goals. We need such kind of goals. And I think Ivan Toney could get you that. Ole Watkins could get you that. Osimhen could get you that. But could you get any of them in January? Well, it's a question that we wait to see how Arsenal will answer it. And the moment we do, you'll be the first guys to know, because you're on the best Arsenal platform. See you soon.